The Torch, Edition 18. When disaster strikes, why do we only pay attention to the death toll? Faced with so many accounts of death in our societies, are we prone to overlooking a significant segment of the most vulnerable in our communities? General knowledge quiz time. Question 1. How many people were killed in the recent attack on the Capitol in Washington, D.C.? Question 2. How many people were killed in the Christchurch shooting in 2019? Question 3. Who was Breonna Taylor? Question 4. Who was George Floyd? Well done. I am sure most people reading this were correct in their answers. Now try this. Question 5. How many people were seriously injured in those attacks? And for the bonus prize. Question 6. Who is Jacob Blake? I'm willing to bet that less people got this one without looking it up. The difference between the first 4 questions and the last 2, of course, is that the first 4 involved death, while the last 2 were about serious injury and very possibly permanent disability. The point I am making is that for some reason we tend to direct our attention, horror, and outrage toward death, while almost never showing lasting interest in those that get seriously or permanently injured or disabled in these kind of horrific incidents. Interestingly, media, not just our own, but globally, perpetuate the foolish fascination by repeating over and over again the death toll of a tragic event. Soon, after about a day, the numbers of those who have died are still high on the agenda, while for some reason, details of injured fall away from view and are almost immediately forgotten. To me, the greatest illustration of this is the comparison between George Floyd and Jacob Blake. They were both involved in high-profile incidents involving police in the US. One was killed, Floyd, while Blake was terribly injured. No surprise there with 7 bullets in his back, leaving him paralyzed. Yet, who is more famous? So what, you might ask? Is there an economist in the house? Ask yourself, what is costlier to family, community or economy, death or disability? With the greatest respect to those who have lost someone or those who have passed away, death is pretty fine. Tragic certainly for those left behind, but they have no choice but to move on and deal with the aftermath, emotionally and perhaps financially, should the person have been a breadwinner. However, if you have been lucky enough to have survived a gang shooting, taxi or bus accident or some other trauma and have been left with a serious and lasting injury like Jacob Blake was, what does the future look like? Who will pay for hospital care, rehabilitation, assistive devices such as wheelchairs, prosthetics, or other technology? Who will convince your boss that you actually can work again, but will need a little time or some reasonable accommodation to be able to do so? Who will care or even know that you exist if we and media do not shift the attention towards the more significant issue? I wonder, in the light of our universal tendency to overlook and therefore underestimate the sheer scale of later onset disabilities, whether we are not missing whole swaths of communities left vulnerable by our ignorance and inattention. For those who might struggle to see the cartoon, it depicts a person in a hazmat suit staring in fear at a classic person with a disability in a wheelchair. The caption reads, "Disability is not contagious." Due to our atavistic and almost pathological avoidance of disability in our everyday society, it is a surprise that we understand so little and see even less. In a country like ours, with so much crime, so many accidents, and other phenomena that disable so many, can we afford not to open our eyes and pay a little more attention? Jeremy Opperman, Newlands Rotary, February 2021. Sneak preview of the next Wobblies Inc. edition, tackling the greatest barrier of all, the attitudinal barrier.